When development of a franchise changes hands, it's not uncommon for a long-running numbered series to drop those numbers and adopt a bunch of forgettable subtitles instead, and Crash Bandicoot is a prime example of this. Crash Bandicoot 3 Warped came out in 1998, but since leaving Naughty Dog's hands, there's been a few mainline Crash games that I bet most of you either don't know about or don't care about. It may not seem important, but this lack of numbered titles creates a clear distinction between the true entries in a franchise and the pretenders, whether that's deserving or not. This perceived shift in quality means it's a big deal when a property winds up with a new studio who decides to slap that number back on there. It's a bold move that says this is the definitive next step in the series, and in the case of Crash Bandicoot 4 It's About Time, that boldness has been backed up by immaculate platforming and a presentation that's just packed with personality. Much of Crash 4's personality is a byproduct of its surprising focus on story. The game follows Crash and Coco as they attempt to undo the cosmic damage caused by Doctors Cortex and Entropy following their escape from imprisonment in the past and subsequent efforts to conquer the multiverse. To that end, the Bandicoots must gather the quantum masks that control time and space and return the multiverse to normal. Now, on the surface, this seems pretty standard for a Crash plot. Collect the MacGuffins, beat the evil scientists, party on the beach. But the game takes a lot of time to let its characters interact with one another, and even features a handful of really surprising twists. As a Crash fan though, what I appreciate most about the game is the reverence that it has for the series as a whole, including the games that it kinda throws under the bus with its bold, tongue-in-cheek title. It doesn't go back to the nostalgia well too often, but a variety of fun and interesting characters from the franchise's history get a little time in the spotlight, and there are a lot of smaller nods that Crash Bandicoot diehards are gonna get a kick out of. A lot of those smaller nods take the form of background elements, and on that note, Crash Bandicoot 4 It's About Time provides plenty of richly detailed environments to platform your way through. From the sandy beaches of Insanity Island to the futuristic skyways of the Snacks Dimension, the game is home to a wide variety of colourful levels that span all of time and space, and these vibrant settings are packed with little touches that really make them feel alive. These memorable locales are accompanied by character redesigns that feel substantial without overstepping the mark, and animations that are fluid and bouncy and just a joy to watch. All of that visual joy is backed up by authentic sound effects that take me right back to my childhood, and a really fun, catchy soundtrack that honestly holds up pretty well when compared to that of the originals. Every track has this upbeat energy to it, and although they often share motifs or prominent instruments like that classic Crash Bandicoot marimba, each has their own unique quality. For instance, the music from the Mad Max-esque Hazardous Wastes have this undeniable junkyard vibe thanks to percussion that sounds like it's being pounded out on corrugated iron, while the Louisiana-inspired Mosquito Marsh features big band-style themes for its city levels and less busy slide guitar and banjo-focused tracks for when you reach the bayou. This wide variety of styles is reflected in the game's platforming too, which shouldn't be super surprising considering the franchise's history of vehicle sections and auto-scroll levels, but it actually did catch me off guard. But I'm getting a little ahead of myself here. Crash Bandicoot 4 It's About Time is a linear platformer that features a bunch of obstacle-packed levels for you to jump, slide, and spin your way across, and it might just be the most responsive that the Wampa-fueled marsupial has ever been. The game's controls are super tight, which is great because although it starts off relatively friendly, Crash 4 is not afraid to ramp up the challenge of later or optional stages, making timing and precision key. This might sound pretty intimidating, but Crash 4 does do a fantastic job of slowly introducing new concepts and techniques to you as you progress, thanks to its return to a linear level progression. Though the sense of player choice that came from the second and third game's Warp Room style might be lost, Crash 4 benefits by being able to build on the player's knowledge of levels they've already beaten to inform later challenges, and it allows the game to get much more difficult without feeling overwhelming. Of course, there are some elements of the game that do allow you to break away from that linear flow of levels. In addition to the standard Crash and Coco levels, Crash Bandicoot 4 It's About Time also introduces alternate timeline levels that intersect with the core stages. These stages star Tawna Bandicoot, Dingodile, and even Dr. Cortex himself, and they all differ pretty drastically from the standard Crash gameplay. Tawna's levels are probably the most similar to the standard stages given her ability to double jump, as well as her kicks and ground pound that stand in for the usual spin and belly flop, but there are some differences. For starters, Tawna has a grappling hook that lets her smash distant crates, deal with enemies at range, or zip to specific points in a level. She also has a wall jump which allows her to tackle unique obstacles. Dingodile and Cortex, however, are very different from the norm. Dingodile has a similar spin attack, but the main focus of his sections is his vacuum cannon. With this weapon, Dingodile can suck up crates to collect fruit and other items, or turn TNT crates into weapons as you vacuum them up and launch them out. This comes with its own challenges as you're able to vacuum up nitro crates which explode on impact, but it also affects your platforming. Dingodile has a pretty average jump but can hover with his cannon instead of performing a double jump. This gives you a decent range on jumps as well as a tiny boost in height at the back end, and it's really satisfying to push the hover to its limit before barely landing safely. The Cortex sections are where things stumble a little bit, but I think they're still a really neat addition to the mix. His jumps are relatively garbage, lacking a double jump of any sort, but Cortex does have a dash to balance things out a little bit. In stark contrast to the rest of the game, the dash feels rather stiff, which makes sense with regards to Cortex as a character, and it requires a lot of getting used to as a result. But once you get a feel for the distance of his dash, Cortex's levels can offer some entertaining, if incredibly difficult, gameplay. It's also fitting that his sections require a little more thought than the other characters, as a large focus of these stages involves using his ray gun to transform enemies into floating platforms or bounce pads, and not every situation suits both options. While the majority of the game's variety does come from these spin-off levels, Crash and Coco stages are peppered with bite-sized breaks from the core platforming as well. These usually take the form of auto-scroll sections where you blindly run towards the camera and away from some massive pursuer, or ride-on sections like the polar bear or jetboard sequences where you either blast through a stage, dodging hazards at high speed, or navigate treacherous waters respectively. These elements all make a return from previous Crash games, and they're just as exciting and fun to play as they were in the classics, thanks to Crash 4's consistently responsive controls. There are brand new elements to the standard platforming challenges as well, in the form of the Quantum Masks. Unlike Aku Aku, who serves as a progressively better shield, the Quantum Masks give you brand new abilities that allow the game to throw some really unique obstacles at you. These range from shifting dimensions to switch items and hazards in and out of existence, to slowing down time so you're able to navigate fast-paced death traps. These reality warping concepts are so foreign to the Crash franchise that they take a little getting used to, but thanks to the linear layout of the game, the complexity of these mask-based obstacles can gradually increase over time. Combined with relatively minor additions to the base mechanics like grind rails, swinging vines, and wall run surfaces, the game can throw some daunting sequences at you towards the end without ever making you feel like you're in over your head. But if the sound of the game's difficulty still has you a little worried, have no fear. Crash Bandicoot 4 It's About Time offers a surprising amount of options that should make the game accessible for series veterans and newcomers alike. The game begins by asking you whether you want to enable lives or simply restart at the nearest checkpoint regardless of how many deaths you've had, but the game also assists you in more subtle ways as well. Like the classic games, if you find yourself dying too often, the game will respawn you with an Aku Aku mask to help you out. Additionally, if you're falling just short of the next checkpoint, then Crash 4 will sneak in an earlier checkpoint to help you push through. Hell, even the game's boss fights, which are fun and frantic combinations of old-school platforming and new quantum mask mechanics, are pretty forgiving thanks to mid-fight checkpoints. There are also some more overt options on hand, such as enhanced shadows that highlight where your character is going to land while they're in the air, which can be very handy for some of the tighter platforming challenges in the late game. But Crash 4's options aren't limited to adjusting its challenge either. I was surprised to find that the game has quite a few accessibility options on offer, including font size and style for subtitles, as well as multiple colorblind filters that can have their intensity adjusted, and fully remappable controls. Now, I can't speak to the effectiveness of most of these options personally, but it is nice to see them on offer. It's also really nice to see just how much content Crash Bandicoot 4 has to offer. On top of its solid amount of core and alternate timeline levels, the game offers a ton of collectibles which in turn unlock a bunch of cool things. Each level has a selection of gems to collect which unlock skins for Crash and Coco, as well as time trials that reward quick players with different kinds of relic. There are also inverted levels which offer more gems for beating mirrored levels, and rewind challenges that are unlocked by collecting tapes in certain stages without dying. It's actually kind of shocking how much content Crash 4 has to offer, and the additional levels are home to some really cool details, such as completely different art styles in the inverted stages, or classic Crash tunes for the flashback style rewind challenges. Oh, and the game offers multiplayer modes as well, such as pass the controller options for playing the story, or a competitive mode that includes checkpoint races or competitions that revolve around breaking crates. This game is jam-packed with stuff to do. With all that said, Crash Bandicoot 4 It's About Time is excellent. I came into Crash Bandicoot 4 It's About Time cautiously optimistic, and the game has far exceeded all of my expectations. The game features tight, precise platforming and a truckload of rewarding and challenging content, all wrapped up with vibrant visuals, super smooth animations, and a soundtrack that I could listen to for hours on end. As I said at the top of this review, calling the game Crash 4 was a bold move on the part of the developers, and they backed it up with pure quality. Definitely check this one out whether you're a Crash veteran or a newcomer that just loves quality platformers. Crash Bandicoot 4 It's About Time is available on Xbox One and PS4.